At this point in the season, you got 3 type of players on your roster: the rock solid guys that you trust, the flyers that you're hoping will pop off one day, and the players who just aren't living up to what you drafted them to be. And if you wait too long on the wrong ones, that's how a playoff team turns into another lost season. Today we're breaking down 6 players that you should be legitimately worried about right now. Players whose roles, production, or schedules are trending in the wrong direction, and if you're not paying attention, these are the guys who can quietly sink your season before you even realize it. Welcome back to The Corner, your #1 destination for everything fantasy basketball related. If you're serious about winning your league this season, you're in the right place. Every single week we break down the rankings, waiver pickups, trade targets, breakout players, and so much more. Everything you need to stay ahead of your competition. So if you're locked in and ready to dominate, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and let's get into the video. We are now 6 weeks into the season, and we now have enough data to know which players are struggling and which players just have a decreased role on their teams this year. One is better than the other, but both are equally a concern. Fantasy basketball is a long season, but if you're slipping games early in the season, it is going to make that playoff push later even more difficult. To kick off this list, we've got Buzelis, and before anybody freaks out, this is not me telling you to drop him. Do not drop him. But this is me telling you it might be time to start thinking about moving him in a package deal before the value dips even further. Buzelis opened the season on a really strong note, but since then the production has cooled off dramatically. And what's more concerning than the numbers is the minutes. With the return of Kobe White, we've seen a very noticeable decline in Buzelis' workload going forward. And that is a real issue here. Earlier in the season, I said Buzelis was one of my top breakout picks this year because of how efficient he was going down the stretch as a rookie. But that leap from last year hasn't fully translated into reliable fantasy value. And 6 weeks in, that is officially a problem. Now, there's nuance to the situation. When you zoom out and look at the full picture, he has improved across the board as a player, don't get me wrong. And I want to be crystal clear, this is not a Buzelis sucks segment. This is not a drop recommendation unless he falls off even harder than he currently is at. He's averaging 14 points per game on 46% shooting. He's more comfortable, and year over year, he has taken that step as a player. But being better in real life doesn't always mean anything for fantasy, and this is a fantasy basketball channel. So right now, Buzelis just isn't a fantasy difference maker. If you're in shallow leagues, I actually think it's time to drop him and stream because the opportunity cost to keep him is just too high. In deeper leagues, you have to hold him. But even then, if you're trying to shake things up, you need a star. This might be the perfect moment to package him in a deal before the minutes drop becomes even more obvious. Buzelis is still young, he's still talented, and the long-term outlook for his career is fine. But for this season, right now in week 6, you need to start being honest about what he is and what he's not doing for your fantasy team. Next up, we've got Jaren Jackson Jr. And look, it is no secret that he has struggled to start the season. The Grizzlies are sitting 10th right now in the West. They're dealing with a mountain of injuries, and the instability has led directly to JJJ being wildly inefficient. Let me just list the numbers that are currently down year over year for Jaren Jackson Jr. We got field goal attempts, points, assists, rebounds, and steals. When every major category trends downward at the same time, it is no surprise that his fantasy production has taken a hit this year. But here's the thing, I am not ready yet to give up on Jaren Jackson Jr. Memphis is finally starting to get a little bit healthier, and as that roster stabilizes, the floor should rise up a bit for JJJ. He's always been a rhythm player. When the spacing is clean and the pace is consistent, his numbers naturally rise. But right now, everything in Memphis has just been chaotic. However, we do need to talk about the coaching change because that's the part nobody seems to want to acknowledge right now. When Taylor Jenkins was fired last year right before the playoffs, JJJ's production took an immediate dip into the playoffs, and he dropped right down to the same averages that he's putting up right now underneath this new system. At the time, it seemed like a small sample size issue, but now we're nearly 3 months in, and the early dip looks to be more like a trend. If this is the new version of the Grizzlies offense, the slower pace, less freedom for JJJ, fewer design touches, then yes, this is a major long-term problem for his value. I'm not waving the white flag just yet, but it's absolutely time to start ringing the alarm bells. If this doesn't turn around once the roster is fully healthy, we may need to have a real conversation about whether he is even a top 60 player for the rest of the season. Next up, we have Jalen Williams, and this one is honestly Very, very concerning. There is something going on in OKC that they're absolutely not telling us about J-Dub. He has been rolled out every single night this season with no real timetable for his return. Coming into the year, we already knew he was expected to miss around 3 to 4 weeks with the wrist injury. That was expected. But that original timeline has now come and is gone, and we still have no real update. There's been no progress reports, no ramp-up schedule, nothing. On Halloween, he had a second procedure to remove the screw in his wrist that was causing some discomfort, and that updated timeline at that point was an initial 2 more weeks, and then he should be back into the court doing basketball activities. Well, we're way past that now, and OKC still has given us radio silence around this injury. At this point, it's absolutely fair to say it's time to panic on this player. In most leagues, J-Dub was a 3rd or 4th round pick. That is a cornerstone for your rosters. And the longer he stays out, the bigger the hole is going to be in your lineup. You can't keep bleeding production hoping week after week that this is finally the one where he comes back into the lineup. And it's actually funny that I say that because just watch. With my luck, I'm going to upload this video and OKC is going to randomly announce that he's returning soon. But if we're being honest, it feels more and more like J-Dub playing on this wrist issue last season and pushing through the pain to help the Thunder make that championship run may have caused a lot more long-term damage that we didn't fully understand at the time. If you drafted J-Dub, you're in one of the toughest positions in fantasy basketball right now because you can't drop him because the upside is way too high when he does return, but you also can't trade him because nobody wants to buy an injury with no timetable. This is the definition of a panic player, someone who could still be a league winner, but right now he is sinking your team. You're stuck holding and hoping and waiting, and that uncertainty is the worst part. So next we have John Collins, and this is going to be the shortest segment of this video because honestly there isn't much left to say. He has been absolutely terrible in LA this season. Last year when he was in Utah, at least there were flashes of greatness, moments where you could talk yourself into thinking that there's upside. But this season, that ship has sailed, that ship has sunk, and is currently sitting at the bottom of the ocean. If you drafted him hoping he'll carve out some type of real role in the Clippers team, it's time to face the reality that is not going to happen. The Clippers have desperately needed more scoring all season long. Kawhi has missed multiple games, Harden has had to carry heavy stretches of offense, and the bench that is currently in LA is just madly inconsistent. And even with all that, John Collins is still completely irrelevant on the fantasy front. He has not shown any upside, he's not flashing potential, and he's not even flirting with fantasy relevance at this point. And the wildest part to me is that he is still rostered in 56% of ESPN leagues right now. That number is insanely way too high. The panic alarm shouldn't just be ringing at this point, it should have gone off 2 weeks ago. And if you're still holding him, it is time to move on. There are way better options on the waiver wire in every single league format. Collins is not a stash. He is not a buy low player. He isn't even a bounce back candidate at this point. He is a drop. Let him rot on the waiver wire. Now this player was a little confusing to me as I was doing my research and I kept seeing his name pop up. Dyson Daniels is a player who had a lot of question marks early in the season, and honestly, I think a lot of that was just a massive overreaction to a slower start. We see this every single year. A young player struggles out of the gate and suddenly half of the fantasy community is ready to drop them before Halloween. But with Dyson, that just never made any sense. Dyson has already proven that he's one of the most valuable fantasy assets in the NBA, and it all comes down to something that you just flat out cannot teach, and that is elite basketball intuition. His reads, his timing, his anticipation, that stuff is rare, and you see it clearly in a stat that matters most for him. He's averaging 2 steals a game right now. That alone keeps him being fantasy relevant. You cannot replace that kind of defensive production on the waiver wire. It gives him one of the safest floors of any young role player in the entire NBA. And now the rest of his game is finally starting to catch up. If you look at his numbers in November, you're seeing the natural progression that we expected over the year. The scoring is starting to bump up, the rebounding is starting to bump up, and his minutes are stabilizing. He's not going to be a prolific scorer. I don't think he ever becomes that type of player, and I think that's perfectly fine. That's not why you roster him. Dyson impacts winning in so many different ways with his steals, rebounds, assists, and overall efficiency. And that versatility is what makes him a player that you absolutely do not panic about. If you drafted him, you hold him. If someone in your league is panicking about him, I think you should buy low on him. Dyson Daniels is trending in the right direction, and everything he's doing is sustainable. And the last player on this list that we're going to talk about today is Zach LaVine, and this one is rough. LaVine started off the year on an absolute heater, and for a minute, it looked like the Kings made the right move pairing him with DeRozan and Sabonis, but right after those first 2 weeks, his production didn't just dip, it fell off an absolute cliff, and that's not an exaggeration. Back in October, LaVine was averaging 29 points per game, and with LaVine, that's really the only stat that matters. He is a pure scorer. He doesn't do much else at all on the basketball court, and that's where all his fantasy value comes from. But so far in November, he's down to 17 points a night, and that is a massive drop off. And the concerning part is why it's happening. This isn't just a shooting slump. His percentages didn't drop a lot from month to month. Yes, his field goal percentage is down about 6% from October to November, but the real issue is that he's taking 7.5 fewer shots per game right now. That is brutal for a player whose entire fantasy value comes from volume scoring. And the biggest change from October and November is pretty clear: Russell Westbrook being moved into the starting lineup. Now, obviously, there could be more going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. A lot of things happen behind the scenes, but when a player loses 7 shots per night, those attempts are going somewhere. And Westbrook has been absorbing a lot of that usage. And again, LaVine is not a rebound, assist, defense kind of guy. That's just not him. He is a scorer. If he's not scoring, he's not worth much in fantasy. So if you roster LaVine, it is absolutely time to panic. Don't make a dumb move and sell him for nothing, but it's time to start thinking realistically about how to offload him before this becomes your season-long problem. So these are the 6 players that I'm officially concerned about as we enter the middle half of the season. If you roster any of them, it might be time to pivot before the season starts to slip away from you. Do not wait until February to fix a December problem. Make moves now while you still have leverage on your team. But before you go, don't stop watching here. If you want to actually win your league, click the video on your screen right now. And that one, I break down the players with real league winning upside that you need to target right now. Thanks for stopping by the corner. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.